extreme radio for extreme times. This is A View from Space with the Spaceman on Talk Radio AM 640.
I'm the guy they call the Spaceman. This is A View from Space. I'd like to welcome you in if you're driving around town right now listening to AM 640, or if you're at work maybe listening on the AM 640 app, I'd like to welcome you in too. Or if you're listening to me right now on Shaw Direct on Channel 865, I welcome you in. Or if you're listening to me on your 3 or 4G personal communication device via the Stream the World software, I welcome you in too. Or maybe you're what some call the best seat in the house, sitting in front of your Mac or your PC, logged on to am640toronto.com, picking up the live audio streaming there. I welcome you in. Wherever you are in the world, I welcome you in. The overlords of our world, whom I call the Illuminati, are guided by 3 things. They are numerology, astrology, and sacred geometry. Well, astrology, the movement of the planets and the stars, is the driving force behind this latest black magic spell being cast over the world as a great pall this rare Easter weekend, when the Jewish Passover and the Christian Easter religious ceremonies converge. This has been made possible by calendars. Yeah, this creates a situation in which Easter can actually be a whole month before Passover. Or let me put it another way. Think of it this way, that Jesus be resurrected before he's even crucified. On the assumption, of course, that the Last Supper was during the priestly Passover sacrifice in Jerusalem. Now, I truly believe the God of the Illuminati, who is Lucifer, Satan, Saturn, the master timekeeper, wants us all to be aware of this clock ticking. Calendars are man-made, and it is the timing mechanism being used. Now, as you know or may not know, the chaos in the world today is being created by the pitting of 2 sides against one another, the pitting of the sun cult against the moon cult to create change. Because chaos creates change. I said, if you maybe didn't notice, but hey, it's hard not to notice that there is the sun cult battling the moon cult. I mean, it's pretty obvious. It's Islam versus Christians and Jews. So listen to me carefully now. The Islamic calendar is based totally on the movement of the moon. The Gregorian calendar is based totally on the movement of the sun. Understand? The sun cult versus the moon cult, pitted against one another, controlled by the third entity, the Illuminati. Now, the biblical calendar, as stated in the King James Version of the Bible, uses both the sun and the moon. Now, we have now witnessed, with this incredible astrological phenomenon in the sky, we have now witnessed 3 blood moons falling on Jewish religious holidays. Earlier this morning, on this ominously rare occasion, the 3rd of the tetrad of 4 blood red moon lunar eclipses appeared in the heavens. This one made it the 3rd, as I said, in this tetrad of 4 in an 18-month-long span. A double 9, or a hidden 666, the number of the beast, the Antichrist. The blood moon eclipse was visible in the skies of North America, mostly the United States, really the best view in California, for about 4 minutes, while Asia and Australia saw it for the full length, a total of 12 minutes. Yes, the royal number evoked. The event is called a tetrad, since it involves 4 successive total blood red lunar eclipses, each followed by 6 full moons. The tetrad of 4 alignments within a couple of years, just 2 years, happens just a very few times in history, in every 2,000 years. This has only happened a few times before, as an example, of the last 5,000 years. It's only happened 3 times in the past 500 years. For example, from 1600 all the way to 1900 AD, there were none at all. 3 of the 4 blood moons have now already occurred. The first happened last year, April 15th, 2014. It was the Jewish Passover, and the second was October 8th, 2014, which was the Feast of Tabernacles for the Jewish religion. The third blood moon, earlier today, and the final blood moon of the tetrad is going to happen a little later this year, September 28th, during the Feast of Tabernacles. There has been a blood moon on all 4 dates. There's to be 9 sets of triad blood moon eclipses in this 21st century we're living in. Each time the tetrad has happened during this 2,000-year time span, there's been a significant religious event involving Israel that accompanies it. It's almost as if something or someone were planning actions in the Middle East with these celestial events as their guide through the ages. If you're wondering what the answer is to the question, is something or someone planning actions involving the Middle East and the world around blood moon eclipses? The answer is an emphatic yes. This closely spaced succession of blood moon eclipses is a very rare occurrence. Red moons are predicted in the King James Version of the Bible, for instance, and signify important events. And just listen to the important historical events with a connection to Israel. 4 total lunar eclipses occurred in the Jewish Passover and Feast of the Tabernacles in the year 162 to the year 163 AD, coinciding with the worst persecution of Jews and the Christians in the history of the Roman Empire. Within 3 years, the Antonine Plague killed 8 million people, a third of the population. 4 total lunar eclipses occurred in the Jewish Passover and Yom Kippur holidays in 795-796 AD, while King Charlemagne and the Holy Roman Empire established a demilitarized zone, buffer zone between France and Spain, ending centuries of Arab invasions into Western Europe. 4 total lunar eclipses occurred on the Jewish Passover and Yom Kippur holidays in 842-843 AD also. Shortly after the eclipses, the Vatican Church in Rome was attacked and looted by an Islamic invasion from Africa. 4 total lunar eclipses occurred on the Jewish Passover and Yom Kippur days in 860 to 861 AD, shortly after the eclipses by the Byzantine Empire defeated Arab armies in the Battle of Lalakone in Turkey and permanently stopped the invasion of the Islamic world into Eastern Europe. I've got more on this. Much more It's a view from space on Talk Radio AM 640. I'm the Spaceman, and I'm just getting started. I'm the Spaceman. This is a view from space. I communicate by email only. Spaceman at 640toronto.com, one address. The other, space at 640toronto.com. And thank you so much. I really appreciate the one that you've sent. I really and truly do. Thank you. Now, let me just recap quickly. 4 total lunar eclipses happened. Jewish Passover, Feast of Tabernacles in 162 to 163 A.D., worst persecution ever of the Jews and Christians in the history of the Roman Empire. And within 3 years, a plague killed over 8 million, a third of the population. 4 total lunar eclipses occurred in the Jewish Passover and Yom Kippur holidays in 795 to 796 A.D., with King Charlemagne running the Holy Roman Empire, putting up a buffer zone between France and Spain, ending centuries of Arab invasions into Western Europe. 4 total lunar eclipses occurred in the Jewish Passover and Yom Kippur again in 842, 843 A.D. Right after that those eclipses, the Vatican Church in Rome was attacked and looted by the Islamic invasion from Africa. 4 total lunar eclipses occurred on the Jewish Passover and Yom Kippur holidays in 860 to 861 A.D., when the Roman Empire defeated Arab armies in Turkey and permanently stopped the Islamic invasion of Eastern Europe. Prior to the last century, the last red moon tetrad happened during 1490 to 1493. In 1493, the first tetrad saw the expulsion of Jews by the Catholic Spanish Inquisition. 4 total lunar eclipses occur on the Jewish Passover and the Feast of Trumpets, 1493 to 1495. Only months after the Catholic monarch King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella expelled all the Jews out of Spain. In 1478, you see, Pope Sixtus IV allowed King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella to establish a special branch of the Spanish Inquisition. You may have heard of it. There's believed to be a danger to the church from Jews masquerading as Christians. It was postulated by the Vatican. Such Jews were referred to as marranos. Swine is the meaning of that Spanish word. In 1492, the Roman Catholic Church persuades King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella to expel from Spain all Jews who were unwilling to convert to Christianity. About 160,000 of them left the country. When a blood moon coincides with Passover's Seder night, history has shown it's a sign that something big is getting ready to happen. And that's exactly what happened in the year 1493. This coincides with the beginning of the fall of Spain after all the Jews were ordered out of the country the year prior to the blood moon eclipse. It's seen as the King James Version of the Bible's God announcing to the world that the mantle of prosperity has now been placed on the shoulders of the infant nation that would soon be born, that would later become the United States of America, since it became a refuge for the Jewish people. Remember, a year before the blood moon eclipse, 1493, the year was 1492. Remember, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered America. An accident? Hardly. Coincidence? Not a chance. Another appearance of 4 blood moons appearing on Hebrew holy days was 1949 to 1950. They occurred on Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles, and the next day Israel was declared a nation. Yet another time, 1967 to 1968, when the Six-Day War took place, uniting the city of Jerusalem for the first time in 2,000 years. A monumental prophetic event, as it was heralded by the world and the Illuminati-controlled mass media, as it was in those days. And if you want another sign, try this. After the first 2 blood moons in the sequence and before the final 2 blood moons this year, there was the solar eclipse. Eclipsed by a new moon on the spring equinox of all times. March 20th just happened a few days ago. I went deeper than a black hole in it on that show. March 20th. 2015, the new moon eclipsing the sun on the exact date of the spring equinox and the exact date of the Jewish holy day Rosh Hashanah. A solar eclipse is a symbol for the Antichrist. It doesn't seem like a well-contrived black magic spell cast by the elites, does it? They are pulling the strings. They are controlling every move made in this world and are using the power of astrology and numerology to get it done. A framework for an historic nuclear agreement with Iran has just this week, of all weeks, been struck. Just as predicted here on AVFS, on Talk Radio AM 640, all of 3 weeks ago or more. But think about it. The American administration is exuberant about it. The Iranians are ecstatic. But the United States Congress and the Jewish government are totally against this deal to be consummated by the end of June. And it will be. How did this news go down in Israel, you might wonder, on this deal framework struck? Well, many believe this bad Iran deal was in fact foretold in this latest phenomenon of the blood moon celestial sign above. So declares the Israeli Times headlines. Just yesterday, they believe the blood moon lunar eclipse is foretelling an upheaval in the Jewish world and are calling for interfaith prayer for Jerusalem, especially during this blood moon lunar eclipse this weekend. So you see, Israel has a lot of past evidence to go on to make them think in this way. What with the Spanish Inquisition, Israel's War of Independence, the Six-Day War, all occurring during these periods of 4 blood moons, even their country being founded on one. Another one was very close to happening during the fall of the Second Temple of Solomon also. Although it wasn't a tetrad year, there were a host of heavenly events above. Yes, this is a very trying, worrisome time. It's also said that there was a blood moon tetrad eclipse during the time period of 32 AD to 33 AD, the time which many believe that is the time period when the crucifixion of Jesus Christ took place. During the first blood moon of this tetrad, last year, April 15th, there was a planetary alignment in the solar system that accompanied the start of this tetrad series. There are several convergences of events with numerical values around the start of this tetrad that appear to be very, very significant and monumental, in fact. if the implications are realized prophetically for Israel, the Palestinians, and the rest of us in this world. Such events are always carefully structured and plotted around a special timeline. This blood moon phenomenon, that is the start of the tetrad, which is the 4 consecutive total lunar eclipses to occur in 2014 and 2015. It's been made well aware by many. The significance of this particular tetrad is that the lunar eclipses occur precisely on the holy biblical feast days of Passover and Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles. From a biblical perspective, the Palestinian peace partition plan, this new Kerry plan that's been framework agreed on, appears to be wrapped up in this time frame of the start of the tetrad phenomenon that we've been involved in last year and this year. I'm talking about April 15th, 2014, the first one, the start of it. You see, since the Oslo Accords, incremental steps have been taken by these Luciferians who are in control of this world, control of the organized religions, control of the governments, to set the conditions for the eventual partition of the biblical land of Israel as predicted in the Bible, in Joel chapter 3, verse 2. Many biblical scholars believe that the Oslo Accords might be that prophetic covenant that is to be confirmed by many in the last days, that could then also set the stage for the rebuilding of the third temple of Solomon and the advent of the, are you ready? Appearance of the Antichrist. Let me continue this right after this break. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm Space, back with more next. I'm the guy they call Space. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. This is View from Space. Emails too, spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. Thanks for the one you sent. As I said before the break, what we are experiencing now is this framework for an Iran nuclear deal with John Kerry and his peace initiative is the culmination of the covenant with death. As stated in the King James Version of the Bible, Isaiah 28, verse 18. That's this peace is the covenant with death, as Isaiah states it in 28:18. That's what it's called there. The timing appears to be coinciding with some amazing astronomical signs in the heavens also. And this is not to predict that by the start of the tetrad itself, which was back in April of 2014, or the end of the Kerry 9-month timetable would be that confirming of the covenant, but that the calculated time and inference to a 9-month period alludes to anticipated and expected birth. 9 months. Because it was a 9-month initiative kicked off by John Kerry, the Secretary of State, back in 2013. What this birth is, what it will look like, or what remains to be seen, but biblically speaking, it will not be good. I believe it's an Iranian nuclear baby. Although the recent push to implement the final and ultimate peace solution between the Palestinians and the State of Israel has been pretty much pushed to the brink here now as an agreement with Secretary of State John Kerry and the Iranian counterpart making the deal these past few days. Now, this in itself shows that the Palestinian-Israeli conflict goes a lot deeper than just a political solution. And it is hiding another agenda, I believe. This John Kerry 9-month peace timetable, he stated it, not me. 9 months. July 28th, 2013 was the day John Kerry, the U.S. Secretary of State, kick-started the Road to Peace plan, specifically by the Oslo Accords, since the 90s between the Palestinians and the State of Israel. What's interesting is that the Accord started in 1993, Oslo Accords, and has had a 7-year time sequence of progress and implementation. From 1973, there has been now a 777. The number of spirituality is 7. What else could it be? Or 777 pattern, like the London bombings, yes. That culminated, that 7-year incremental time sequence progress started in 2014. 1993, 7-year plan. 2000, another 7-year plan implemented. 2007, 7 years later, another 7, which brings us to 2014. Last year's first of the tetrad of blood moon eclipses. It goes hand in hand with this deal. Kerry met with leaders out of both sides and made public announcement the next day, July 29th, 2013. Kerry announces that the full stages, the final blueprint for a solution, were to be implemented without any steps, intermediated steps, in a 9-month timetable. Based on the observations of this specific choosing of timing, it's not hard to see the esoteric rationale for choosing this impregnation time period, 9 months, as it is really hidden in plain sight. Typical fashion of the Masonic overlords. Exactly 9 months from July 29, 2013, is when the paired annular solar eclipse to the first blood moon lunar eclipse occurred on April 29th, 2014. This is just 14 days after the total lunar eclipse that started the tetrad on Passover that occurred April 15th last year. The first of 4. We are now through 3 of them. The hidden clue of this chosen date to culminate in a solar eclipse is that not only is it exactly 9 months from July 29th, John Kerry announcement of the failure is not an option, peace timetable. Remember that? Kerry announced that it was failure is not an option. I had this on months ago. Here it is again in culmination. Exactly as the Spaceman said it would go down. This peace timetable, or war timetable, is numerically associated and tied to a pregnancy. 9 months. How? July 29 is the 212th day of the year, leaving 153 days left to the end of the year. So, this numerical value of 153 is geometric and mathematical, associated with the Vesica Pisces, and alludes to a womb. With such events set in motion, an eventual, birthing is about to take place according to this timetable. Celestially, there is a confirmation of such a birthing. As it is above, as you know, so it is below. As the tetrad starts in Virgo, Mars retrograde will end in Virgo, also on May 20th, and be birthed in Virgo later, July 13th. That was last year. It's already happened. And now, I can't believe for a moment that this is all happenstance. During the time of the tetrad starting, which started this started April 15th again, 2014, last year, and the culmination of this Kerry peace deal ended April 29th, 2014. There were several comets that were within or in proximity of the inner solar system where we're located. What is significant about these comets is the amount. How many there were. Normally, comets enter the solar system in frequency, but not 7 all at one. Yeah, that number, 7 all at one time, and not including Comet Ison. Remember that one? Brought all that ice on everything. Some will either slingshot around the sun like Ison did, or others, called grazers, these comets, disintegrate into the sun directly due to the gravitational pull, we're told. The oddity of this comet phenomenon within the solar system is that it appears that the 7 comets are converging all at the same time. Isn't that incredible? You talk about celestial events. What a year for it. I mean, I haven't seen this kind of a phenomenon since, well, the transit of Venus and the end of the Mayan calendar. Why, if what these converging comet signs in the heavens are insinuating, in conjunction with the retrograde of Mars, the start of the tetrad blood moon on Passover in 14, in April 15th of last year, and the annular solar eclipse corresponding to the end of the 9-month peace initiative, then with special reference to the retrograde of Mars and birthing of Mars, which is the planet of war, means a period of war, or at least serious strife coming upon Israel. This retrograde of Mars has a precedence, as it occurred in Virgo and Leo during the prior 2 tetrads that occurred in the biblical holidays of Passover and Sukkot during the periods of 1949 and 50 and 1967 and 68. The first one, in that area of time where Israel becomes a nation, and 1967 to 68, the war. The 7 comets last year were Pan-stars, 67P. The third, Enki. Very interesting. Let me talk about that in a moment. Also, the fourth, Lovejoy, Siding Spring, Linear 209P, and the final one was called Lovejoy 2011. 7 comets. What's really interesting is that the comet Enki was named as the third. This is a variation of the name Enki, the lord of the sea or waters, as in Neptune, as in Poseidon, the king of Atlantis, and is associated with Aquarius. Enki was the Luciferian creator. Many in the esoteric and occult circles are insinuating that this specific comet, Enki, is signaling the return of Enki himself, the lord of the underworld, Lucifer himself. It would appear that these comets that converged, all 7 of them, at the apparent same time, possibly are signaling that this lord or beast was about to come back from the metaphorical sea, as the Bible, King James Bible, predicts in the end times, which will produce the Antichrist. Will this debut of this person be in accordance with this Iranian nuclear peace deal initiative timetable? I'm the Spaceman. More on the other side of the break. It's Talk Radio, AM 640. I'm the guy that calls space. It's a view from space. Talk Radio, AM 640. Emails too. Space at 640toronto.com or Spaceman at 640toronto.com. Thank you for the one that you've sent. Yes, failure is not an option, we were told by the Secretary of State, John Kerry, who's just inked a framework for a deal that's to be culminated in June, just a few weeks away. That was the start of a 9-month peace initiative. And this convergence of time and space and the heavens above, I believe the world leaders are using it as a means in which they will be using a birthing that is about to take place for their own evil purposes and their own evil timetable. These heavenly signs could allude to the actual birthing of the Antichrist that will be involved with a confirmation coming down the road sometime in the very near future for this peace accord. Yes, I'm convinced this John Kerry Middle East timetable depiction can be seen and understood as a birthing canal. How these Luciferians are going to tie their timetable of a 9-month peace initiative that is now over and has culminated to eclipses. Because it must be done in the heavens. The stars must be aligned, as they say, for the Illuminati to act. Well, we're getting so very close now. All with numerology. All done with numerology, these black magic spells. Astrology. Sacred geometry. Astrology, front and center. The last, well, since April 15th, 2014, and right in the mix of it, this peace accord, this framework for a nuclear deal with Iran. Whatever comes out of it, it will not be good. As it is above, so it is below. The Illuminati believe that. Are you aware at all that the movement of the moon actually dictates when Easter is celebrated even each year? Well, it is. Easter is a shifting date, using the common practice of astrology. It's celebrated on the first Sunday, always the first Sunday, after the first new moon, after Ostara, of the spring equinox. This date also has nothing to do with the resurrection of Jesus Christ. No, this day in the pagan tradition celebrates the return of Semiramis, Ishtar, Venus, Isis. She has many names, into her reincarnated form of the spring goddess. The pagans even have an equivalent to Good Friday. It's Easter Friday. And it has historically been timed to be the third full moon from the start of the year, since the overlapping of pagan Easter to Jesus' resurrection, Good Friday is permanently fixed on the Friday before Easter. Easter is steeped in the Babylonian mysteries, the single most evil, idolatrous system ever invented by Satan. Now, the Babylonians' goddess Ishtar, Isis, Venus, Semiramis, pick a name, it's all the same spirit, is the one that Easter is named after. Another name, Nimrod, wife of Nimrod, Semiramis. In the ancient Egyptian mystery religion, her name was Isis. The real founder of the satanic Babylonian mysteries after Nimrod died. Goddess worship. It's rampant now in the world. Why? I just told you. Semiramis, Ishtar, Isis, whatever you want to call her, created the legend that Nimrod was really a divine son born to her in a virgin birth. She's considered to be the co-founder for all occult religions along with Nimrod. The divine son born to Nimrod and Semiramis without the sperm of Nimrod, as she was immaculately conceived, was Tammuz. In the ancient Babylonian mysteries, Horus, and the ancient Egyptian mystery religion, same story. Easter, you see, we even take the name. It comes from Ishtar, Ostra. It's celebrated widely among various cultures, religions on earth. Ishtar is known by 1,000 names, but they're all the same spirit, as I said. In Babylon, let me go through a few. Ishtar, also called the moon goddess. The Catholics, the Virgin Mary, she's called, the Queen of Heaven. In the Chinese, Xingmu is her name. The Druids know her as Virgo Paratura. Egypt, in the ancient Egyptian mystery religion, she's Isis. The pagan Ephesians called her Diana, the Queen of Heaven. The Etruscans called her Nutria. The Germans, the ancient Germans, called her Hertha. The Greeks called her Aphrodite and Cere. In India, she's known as Isi or Indrani. The ancient Jews called her Ashtaroth. Krishna, people call her Devaki. The Romans, of course, called her Venus. The Scandinavians call her Disa, and the ancient Sumerians call her Nana. The Babylonians celebrated the day as the return of Ishtar, the return of Easter, Ostra, the goddess of spring. This day celebrated the rebirth or reincarnation, another birth. Why do you think that the birthing 9-month plan by John Kerry would culminate on an Easter weekend? Well, of course it would. This is incredible. Eggs, of course, to most people, represent Easter and what it stands for. Why? Well, according to Babylonian legend, you mean you got to go back to Babylon for the egg legend in Easter? Yes. A huge egg falls from heaven, according to Babylonian religion, landing in the Euphrates River. The goddess Ishtar, Ostra, broke out of this egg. Later, the feature of an egg nesting was introduced, a nest where the egg could incubate until it was hatched. A wicker or a reed basket was conceived to hold the Ishtar egg. We call it The Easter egg basket today. Yeah. The Easter egg hunt was conceived. Why? Because if anyone in those ancient times around the Euphrates River in Babylon stumbled across her egg while she was being reborn, she would bestow a blessing upon that lucky person. Because this was a joyous spring festival. Eggs were colored with bright spring colors. And what do? We do the same ritual as Ishtar, Isis, every Easter. You have Easter egg hunts, don't you? With your children? You just did it. The goddess Totem, the moon hare, would lay eggs for good children to eat, you see. Ostra or Ishtar or Semiramis, Venus's hair was the shape that Celts imagined on the surface of the full moon. Now, we all know bunnies don't lay eggs. We are dealing with a legend here, and an occult legend at that. These types of legends traditionally play loose and fast with facts. So Easter, Ostra, or Ishtar, or Isis, was a goddess of fertility. And since the bunny rabbit is a creature that procreates quickly, symbolized the sexual act. The egg symbolized birth and renewal. Together, the Easter bunny and the Easter egg symbolizes the sex act and its offspring. Whether it was Semiramis and Tammuz, or whether it was Isis and Horus, same story. Space back with more. The other side of the break on Talk Radio AM 640. I'm the guy that calls Space. It's a view from space. It's Talk Radio AM 640. Emails, only way I communicate. Spaceman at 640toronto.com. One address, space 640toronto.com. The other. And my resident numerologist checks in tonight. SR writes using simple English gematria. The words 9, printed out, months, equals, in English gematria, 131. 131, a 13 can be seen forwards or backwards. 13, a death and resurrection rebirth number in the occult, of course. Later space, signed SR. Spot on, as usual. So, resurrection eggs, part of the Easter celebration. You probably have also confused the mind of your precious young child by blurring the dividing line between pagan symbolism and the meanings of a Christian resurrection day. See, young children who participate in resurrection eggs in church will be conditioned later in life to accept the fullness of the pagan tradition revolving around the same symbols. At worst, a church participating in the pagan Eastern tradition by promoting resurrection eggs, and maybe even the Easter egg hunt, most do, is guilty of combining Christianity with paganism. There's no two ways about it. The rabbit has nothing to do with Easter unless you go back to the ancient Sumerian legend. In the pagan religion, and you will find it. Oh yeah, rabbits. The legend has it that the goddess Ostra turned into a colorful bird, into a rabbit. And the rabbit then laid colored eggs. See, so a colorful bird is changed into a rabbit. by the goddess Ostra. Lays colored eggs. This is where the Easter bunny and egg hunts came from, and the basis of the Christian festival, Easter. Easter is an annual celebration observed through the Christian world, but there are absolutely no verses in the King James Version of the Bible or elsewhere that authorize and endorse the keeping of this tradition. What's more, the Bible doesn't even mention anything about Easter eggs, Easter baskets, Easter bunnies, or even Lent. But in fact, these very items were part of the pagan rituals of the ancient mystery religion of ancient Babylon and Egypt. So then, where on earth did the tradition of celebrating Easter originate then? I mean, literally, where on earth did this begin? I'm going to inform you of where it was on earth if you don't already know. On tonight's show, Talk Radio AM 640 on AVFS. The secrets, the hidden secrets of the original Easter festival, which was initiated several thousand years ago, are to be revealed to you, and it might shock you to know it, that it was many years before the birth, death, and resurrection of one Jesus Christ. Easter had its origins in the world of the occult. The occult satanic calendar is made up of 4 periods of 13 weeks each. Occultists believe that numbers contain inherent power, and the occultists base their lives on numerology as well as astrology and sacred geometry, as I said. Numerology is also a key component of astrology. So this occult calendar, we call the Gregorian calendar, divided into 4 parts of exactly 13 weeks each. 4 times 13 is 52 weeks, which is our entire year. You must also be aware that the date Easter falls on a different date every year. That's because the moon sets the date, as I said before earlier in the show. The date of Easter can be varied anywhere between March 22nd all the way to April 25th. Why? The First Council of Nicaea by the Roman Catholic Church, 325 AD, established the date of Easter by astrology as the first Sunday after the full moon, meaning the paschal full moon, following the northern hemisphere's vernal equinox. The name paschal comes from pascha, a transliteration of the Greek word, which is itself a transliteration of the Hebrew word Pesach. Both words mean simply Passover. In the occult system, the number 6 equals man, the number 7, the number of spirituality, the number 13, rebellion against the authority and depravity, and rebirth, resurrection. So in the occult or satanic world, the number 13 represents the state of man's having reached divine perfection, self-achieved perfection, and illumination. Ostara's sacred animal, very popular with the Anglo-Saxon pagans, by the way, who worshipped her under the name Ostra, started the whole Easter business. And if you ever wondered what eggs and bunnies have had to do with crucifixion and resurrection, the answer is absolutely zero, nothing. Ostara's sacred animal is, though, a cute little rabbit, an obvious symbol of fertility. Why? Well, simply because the rabbit's gestation period, meaning from the time it's impregnated till it gives birth, is just a quick 30 days. The average size of the litter varies, but it's usually between 4 and 12 bunny rabbits, with larger breeds having even larger litters. A kit, it's a baby rabbit. It can be weaned at about 4 to 5 weeks of age. This means in one season, a single female rabbit can produce as many as 800 rabbits. The egg is her symbol of fertility, fertile purity, So Easter egg hunts are actually packed with symbolic meanings of rebirth and renewal. And who's the greatest bunny of them all? Why? It's got to be Bugs Bunny. And Elmer Fudd? Obviously just a high priest of the great Easter Bunny. Bugs. In case you think I'm flippant, recent research has suggested that Ostara herself, Estra, Ishtar, Isis, was actually invented during a mischievous moment by the Venerable Bede. This well-known monk mentioned her in connection with a pagan festival called Esturmonov in a book written around 750 AD. But a lot of research has failed to find a single trace of her prior to that. Could the Venerable Bede, this well-known monk, this well-respected monk, have been lying, outright lying? Rabbits have been injected into every single culture's mythology. Every culture has a rabbit god. And they're nearly always trickster spirits. What do I mean by trickster spirits? That next on Talk Radio AM 640. This is AVFS. I'm Space. Back with more in just a minute. I'm the Spaceman. It's a View from Space. This is AM 640. Like to email me? Got a question or got some information you'd like to pass along or have a critique of the show or just like to tell me where in the world you're listening to AVFS on Talk Radio AM 640 from? Simply use space at 640toronto.com or Spaceman at 640toronto.com. Thank you so much for the one that you've sent. So I was saying before the break, rabbits have been injected into every culture's mythology. This is the biggest time of year for them. Easter. The Easter Bunny's bringing it. No, it was actually Ishtar, Isis, who brought the egg, fell from the sky, from heaven. But every culture has a rabbit god. Why this fascination with rabbits? Their gestation period's just 30 days. Has many, many rabbits. One single female can produce as many as 800 other rabbits in one season. So you see, Easter egg hunts are actually packed with symbolic meanings of rebirth and renewal. As I said before the break, the rabbit appears in folklore as the trickster archetype. Why? Well, it was used to trick the ancient Babylonians. And because of its ability to outwit its enemies, we're told. That's why in the Bugs Bunny cartoons, which the elites, by the way, are using to brainwash your children into this doctrine of rabbits are the trickster archetype, Elmer Fudd can never kill Bugs Bunny, can he? And surely you've noticed that Bugs Bunny has this egotistical reaction to anything Elmer Fudd would try, the high priest of the great Easter Bunny, Elmer Fudd. Yeah, doesn't matter what he does, he can never kill Bugs, and he acts so aloof, so apart from anything Elmer Fudd is trying to do to him. Clearly showing, of course, that the rabbit is a god in our world. Yeah, Bugs Bunny can be sometimes just so totally bored and aloof as Elmer Fudd tries to kill him in those cartoons. In Aztec mythology, a pantheon of 400 rabbit gods known as Senson, Totochitlan, led by Omatotchitli, or Two Rabbit, represent fertility, parties, and drunkenness. In Central Africa, Kalulu, as they call it, the rabbit is well known as a tricky character, always getting the better of bargains. Now, does that remind you of the Bugs Bunny cartoons you watched as a kid? In the Chinese culture, rabbits accompany Chang on the moon. Chang lives only on the moon. Chang is known to the Chinese as the woman on the moon. Strange, isn't it? Because in the Western world, we call it the man on the moon. You know, the man on the moon. But the Chinese call it the woman in the moon. The dictionary describes the phrase, the man in the moon, as an imaginary person whose face some people think they see on the surface of the moon when it's full. European tradition holds that the man was banished to the moon for some time. Christian lore commonly held that he's the man caught gathering sticks on the Sabbath and sentenced by God to death by stoning in the book of Numbers 9, verses 32 through 36. That bundle of sticks, by the way, the man caught gathering sticks on the Sabbath, sentenced to death by stoning by God, is on the front cover of a Led Zeppelin album. Some Germanic cultures thought he was a man caught stealing from a neighbor's hedgerow to repair his own. Another word that appears in Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin, hedgerow. There's a Roman legend that he's a sheep thief, even. The bunny rabbit in Easter legends. Now, Easter offerings come from the tradition where the priests and the priestesses would bring offerings to the pagan temples for Easter. They bought freshly cut spring flowers, candies to put on the altar for the idol they worshipped. They'd also bake hot crossed buns. I'm serious. Decorating them with crosses symbolizing the cross of Wotan or some other pagan god. These crosses were not originally the cross of Jesus Christ. This is another instance where Satan counterfeits a pagan tradition and is later passed off as a Christian one in church. In fact, the first instance of hot cross buns is traced back to about 1500 BC in Cecrops, the founder of Athens. In Old Testament celebrations and apostate Israel, we see women angering God because they baked these type of cakes to offer them in worship to the Queen of Heaven, Ishtar, the goddess of fertility. She's identified with the planet Venus in Roman times. Oh, it's the same spirit, different name, different empire, different culture. Yes, the English monk, Venerable Bede, I told you about earlier in the show here, the 8th century monk. Well, he was the man who first began to float the idea that the Christian holiday known as Easter was actually taken from the ancient pagan Germanic goddess of spring, Estra, also spelt Easter. She was called Ostara, or Ostre, and was celebrated at the vernal equinox, first day of spring, around the 20th of March. Estra was the goddess of the expectant mother-to-be, you see. The Teutonic goddess of fertility. The Teutonic Knights had huge influence at this time in history due to the involvement of the Hohenstaufen dynasty in the Holy Land. Her symbol is the egg, of course, symbolizing fertility in nature and rebirth from the long winter months. The seeds are now sown, ready to grow, ready to ripen. The goddess is fertile, rich with promise and potential life. It's from this word, ostra, that we get the word estrogen, for the female hormone. To the Saxons, the Germans, she was Ostara. In myth, she is said to have thrilled the children by turning a bird into a rabbit, and then having the rabbit lay colored eggs. Esther was the carryover of this goddess that really began with Isis, Ishtar, the original fertility goddess of spring. As I said, many names: Aphrodite, Venus, Astarte, Ishtar, Semiramis. All these names for what's known as the sacred feminine, which is simply put, really another name for the female manifestation of Satan. Satan is both sexes, androgynous. Since the days of Ishtar, all pagans have used rabbits and Easter eggs as fertility symbols to celebrate the forces of spring. There are so many things connected with the ancient beliefs, but have now been hidden from us. Demeter was the sister of Zeus in the Greek mythology, and other children of Cronus and Rhea. Her name, Demeter, means barley mother or Mother Earth, goddess of fertility. She's also known as Ceres in Rome, and sometimes Dio. Demeter is often seen holding a stalk of grain or corn, sometimes a torch or a crown or a scepter. Yes, it's the Statue of Liberty in New York's harbor, holding the torch. This is the one I'm speaking of. Sacred to her are livestock and agricultural products, with the emphasis on corn, poppy, narcissus, and the crane. She had a lot of lovers, too, including her brother Zeus. One of her children was Persephone, fathered by Zeus, who was carried off by Hades. Iasion was one of her most handsome lovers. He was an interesting character. Demeter fell in love with him, and they made love one day in a field that was plowed 3 times. It's said because of this, Zeus killed him with a thunderbolt. Some say that he was destroyed by the horses of Zeus. Poseidon is the brother of Zeus, by the way, who ruled Atlantis, and horses, of course, are one of the great symbols of Poseidon, as well as the trident. Now, back to the origin of Easter. The most popular spring fertility festival was called Thesmorphia. It got the biggest crowds in Athens and at Eleusis for nearly 2,000 years, the town of Eleusis. Demeter was the festival of Thesmorphia's greatest goddess. She had the most protected cult secrets of the mystery religions because her rituals were performed inside the inner sanctum of the Temple of Demeter, and were so well guarded by the temple devotees that very little has ever come to light as to what actually happened in there. Only part of the Thesmorphia festival was held outside the temple and was publicly recorded, and very little of that was publicly recorded to give us a partial historical record of their human sacrifice sacred rituals that went on inside. More on this festival, Thesmorphia's greatest goddess, Demeter, when I return on Talk Radio AM 640. This is AVFS. I'm Space. Please send your emails to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. I only communicate by email. VP writes, "Hey, Space, as if the cultural program isn't already fully implemented, I just wanted to throw in a reference to Trix cereal. The mascot is a rabbit. always chasing the multicolored cereal, trying to take it away from the children. And the children always reply, "Silly rabbit, tricks are for kids." Yes, driving home the message to the youth. They don't miss a beat. So as I was saying before the break, the most popular spring fertility festival was called Thesmorphia. And it drew the greatest crowds in Athens and at Eleusis, a town, for nearly 2,000 years. Demeter was the festival of Thesmorphia's greatest goddess. She had the most protected cult secrets. Very little has ever gotten out. What happens with the Eleusinian mysteries? But what is known is that the rituals of this Thesmorphia were based on the mythology of the abduction and rape of Persephone, and of what Demeter, Persephone's mother, did after her daughter was abducted in the search that took place for her daughter after she was taken by Hades. The cult's rituals are interpreted according to the Demeter myth. The myth claims that Hades, the dark god of the underworld, falls in love with beautiful Persephone. One day, she picked flowers in an opening in a forest. Hades swoops down in his chariot, snatches Persephone, and carries her off to the underworld, where he forces her to become his bride. Above ground, the mother, Demeter, worried by her daughter's disappearance, searches the earth but couldn't find her. With the help of Helios and Hecate, who supposedly witnessed the abduction, the mother Demeter finally discovers the truth and, in a rage, demands that Hades release her daughter. When Hades refuses, Demeter sends a terrible famine on the earth. Plants dried up. Seeds refused to sprout. The gods begin to suffer from a lack of sacrifices. And finally, Zeus dispatches Hermes, the herald of the Olympian gods, to talk to the lord of the underworld, Hades, and after a long discussion, Hades agrees to release Persephone if she would eat a pomegranate seed. What Persephone didn't understand was that by eating that pomegranate seed, to the mystical location of the in the mystical world of the location of the underworld, a divine symmetry is created that bonds Persephone with Hades. This bond makes sure that the goddess would automatically return to the underworld for a third part of each year, the winter. And during that time, the seeds in the ground wouldn't grow. So Persephone became the spring goddess of youth and happiness, and the underworld queen of the dead. A dual role, duality, that made her both good and evil. Lucifer. On earth, she was the goddess in the spring, and the friend of the nymphs who appeared in the blooming of the spring flowers, symbolizing her annual return from Hades. But in the dark underworld, she was also the dreaded wife of Hades and the queen of darkness, who controlled the fates of all dead men. The reenactment of this myth, the abduction and rape of Persephone, was the key to the rituals of the Thesmorphia rituals, and key to interpreting the bits of information that are known. Oh, I'm telling you, they've got some incredibly serious rituals going on with the Eleusinian mysteries. The mysteries of the spring festival, known as Thesmorphia. even sometimes, as I said, called the Eleusinian mysteries. Each day of the festival had a different name and called for specific rituals. Despite all the secrecy surrounding Demeter's rites at Eleusis, we do know something about the public dimensions of the festivities from literature and archaeology. Initiation was open to all Greek-speaking men, from what we know, women and children who had not tainted their hands with the blood of another, meaning murder. There were two main festivals associated with the mysteries at Eleusis. One, the Lesser Mysteries, the month of Anasterion, February, that happened in Athens itself and prepared the initiate for full initiation, which was the second part, the Greater Mysteries, which were celebrated in the month of Bodromion, late September, early October, and were the more important of the two. The final stage of initiation, which only some ascended to, was the viewing, which took place a year or more after the main initiation of the Greater Mysteries, and we know very little about those details. The Mysteries of Samothrace also had a secondary viewing stage of initiation. The Greater Mysteries at Eleusis lasted for 9 days. In preparation, the youths brought the sacred objects under the direction of the Hierophant, the revealer of the sacred objects, from the inner sanctum at Eleusis, that small town, back to Athens. Then the festival officially begins with a proclamation by the sacred announcer. Hierokiks, the 15th month, on the 15th of the month. Those who were to be initiated then began several days of preparation which centered on purification in the sea and sacrificing pigs. That was on the 18th of the month. On the 19th, the important Iakos procession, or parade from Athens to the small town of Eleusis, begins. Eleusis is about 21 kilometers from Athens. Yes, a 3, the royal number. This is the town Demeter ends up in while searching for her daughter. See, as the myth continues, at this time she has disguised herself and is living apart from the gods of Olympus in this town of mortals, Eleusis. Involved in this parade were the initiates to be, along with the highest-ranking adepts in the cult of Eleusis, including the Hierophant, the priestess of Demeter, the male torchbearer, the female torchbearer assistants, the mystagogues, sponsors of each potential initiate, and others are in the parade. It seems that Iakos was a god that personified the joyous shout at the initiates, to be repeated as they made their way towards the town of Eleusis. Aristophanes' play, The Frogs, give you an idea of the atmosphere and the ritual that was part of this procession. Frogs, by the way, represent evil spirits in witchcraft. The characters in the play talk about the crackle and smell of torches and the dancing and singing that went on as the parade made its way to Eleusis with a ritual cry, Iakos! Iakos! After they broke their fast that prepared them for initiation, the initiates would then drink the kykeon, which Demeter drank in the hymn in preparation for the final ceremony. It was supposedly made from barley, groats, water, and pennyroyal. Pennyroyal. When you research that, pennyroyal, here's what you find. Pennyroyal has been used to induce abortions. But pennyroyal is very dangerous and has led to serious adverse effects and also has caused death. Pennyroyal has also been used for increased menstrual flow. The available scientific information suggests that pennyroyal should not be used to stimulate menstruation. It's a dangerous act and has led to serious adverse effects, even death. Using pennyroyal by mouth could even cause loss of consciousness, coma, confusion, dizziness, fatigue, stiff muscles, fever, agitation, nerve pain, delirium, even seizures, shock, and, death. Pennyroyal use may even lead to vision abnormalities, hallucinations, which I believe is what it was used for. In overdose situations, yes, many died, I'm sure. Other adverse effects involved low blood pressure or slow, irregular heartbeats. Pennyroyal, you see, reduces the urge to breathe. Kidney damage, urinary tract irritation, menstrual bleeding, abnormally low numbers of red blood cells, and spontaneous abortion also occurs. Listen, all cults take you to the door of death with potions, drugs. If you survive, you're back from the dead. You're born again. You are said to have had communication with the gods and are now a god yourself. I'm Space. I got more on the other side of this break on Talk Radio. AM 640. This is AVFS. I'm the guy that calls Space. This is A View from Space on Talk Radio AM 640. Emails to space at 640toronto.com or Spaceman at 640toronto.com. The Eleusinian Mysteries were celebrated until 395 AD when the walls of the sanctuary in Eleusis were breached by Alaric's hordes. But for a millennia before that, thousands of initiates received a mystical experience. And revealing the mysteries was considered an act of impiety, punishable by death. And this is why classical authors have never written a letter on this word, or a word on this Eleusinian mystery. Many of them that went through it are quoted as saying things like, I escaped from evil, I found the better. I came out of the mystery hall feeling like a stranger to myself. Yes, a kind of drug-induced terror trip. And then, as the goddess appears, blissfulness. When they're in touch with the evil spirit. When they're so close to death, the spirit will comes in to claim their soul. And if they come back from it, they survive the Eleusinian mystery and are initiated. If not, you died. The culmination of this festival was the initiation proper. This finale happened at night only, of course, within the central initiation hall. Excavations of this area, which was quite large, reveal something of what went on there. Great columns supported the raised structure, which was equipped with seating on all sides of the hall where initiates to be sat. And inside the hall was a small rectangular room called the Anactoron, which would have housed the sacred objects, and only the Hierophant, chosen from the Umolpid family only, could enter into this room at a particular point in the initiation ceremony. He would then reveal these objects at the very end of the ceremony. There's no direct evidence, But it seems like the story of Demeter and Kore played some role in those secret ceremonies. Participants likely participated in a reenactment of the myth. Almost nothing is known about the rest of the ceremony since, as I said, ancient authors who were initiates were careful not to let out the mysteries, and others who knew of it wouldn't dare write about it, on a penalty of death if they did. Doesn't that remind you of Masonry, secret cults? Listen to this. The best pictures representing an initiation ceremony is the Lovatelli scenery urn and the etchings on what's called the Terra Nova sarcophagus. In ancient archaeological sites found there, the identification of the figure with the lion skin as Heracles means that it depicts the lesser mysteries. In one of the pictures, Heracles is sitting on a low, sacred couch, right arm and breast bare, hoodwinked, blindfolded, and barefoot. The seat is covered with the skin of a lion also, and his feet are resting on the lion's skin instead of making use of the ram skin on which other candidates for initiation stand. In his left hand, he holds a torch, emblematic of purification by fire. He's also represented standing by the Hierophant. Demeter is seated on the symbolic cista, which is covered with a sheepskin. Iacchus, the secret god of the mysteries, is standing on her right. On the drawings of that urn, the Lovatelli urn, Heracles is also hoodwinked, blindfolded, right arm and breast bare. A sieve is shaken over his covered head, signifying purification, symbolic of the separation of evil and good, also being able to reproduce and resurrect. On the urn, pictured in the right, Heracles is clothed in that lion's skin, standing barefoot by the Hierophant, holding a sacrificial pig by its hind legs. The Hierophant is seen sprinkling the victim from a pitcher with his right hand. On his left, he carries a flat earthen vessel on which 3 poppy heads appear. Demeter is seated on the cista, holding a torch on which a serpent, the symbol of the Chthonian deities, is entwined around it. The snake is licking the hand of Iacchus, who is resting on a mystic rod. Demeter looks at Persephone, holding a torch in her left hand. Now, this is quoted directly from the Greek origin of Freemasonry. When everyone arrived the first day at the celebration of Eleusis, the women organized by building temporary shelters, electing the leaders of the camp. On the second day, they began the greater mysteries which, according to myth, produced the cult's magical requests, a fertile harvest. The mysteries included a parody of the abduction and rape of Persephone and the positioning of the female cultists on the ground crying in the role of Demeter for her daughter, of course, and fasting for the return of Persephone, or the return of spring. Sitting on the ground and fasting was also intended to mystically transform and transfer energies of the women into the ground, and also into the false seeds. It's no surprise that the festival was held during the time of the fall planting so as to guarantee a positive response to the cult's magic. Now, on the 5th day of the festival, the participants drank a special grain mixture called kykeon, a symbol of Persephone, and ate Easter eggs in an attempt to put inside themselves the spirit of the goddess. The idea was to produce an incarnated blessing of fertility, both of the crops and of children. And about the same time, certain women called Atlerai were cleansed in the sea and then sent down into the mountainside trenches to recover the sacrificial piglets and various other sacred objects that had been thrown down into the hillside canyons a few days before. Those sacred objects included dough replicas of snakes, replicas of genitalia, which were burned, and with the pigs, and a grain seed mixture was an offering to Demeter. The reason for the casting of the pigs into the mountainside cliffs has been thoroughly debated, and no single interpretation has ever emerged as the absolute authority. While several mystical representations can be made of this symbology, and this dough replicas thrown over the side are obviously fertility symbols. Pig's blood was sacred to the gods, and so key to understanding the ritual, I believe. Greeks, you see, used pigs because of their uncanny ability to find and dig things up that are buried underground, like roots and things. I mean, I'm a farm kid, and I watched pigs as a very young child sticking their snout into the ground and rooting around, finding things inside to eat. They'd eat anything. Some historians conclude from this that the ritual of casting the pigs into the deep was a form of imitative magic based on the underworld myth of Persephone and Hades, meaning casting the pigs into a deep canyon trench and fetching them back out again represented the descent of Persephone into the underworld and then her spring return to the surface of the earth. More on the pigs when I come back on Talk Radio AM 640. This is Space, it's AVFS. I'm the guy to call Space. This is AVFS. It's Talk Radio AM 640. Thank you so much for the emails I've received tonight. Inbox just inundated with all kinds of information and questions and comments. RG, for instance, when I was talking about the rabbits earlier with a connection to Easter, states this very simply: now I see the Cadbury bunny differently. You know, the Cadbury chocolate bunny rabbit that they make in the mold and sell. It's one of the biggest sellers for Cadbury this time of year. Pushing that incredibly old, tired story of Ishtar, Semiramis, Isis, the egg falling to earth. The lucky one who finds it is blessed by Isis. And pigs, I've just been talking about pigs, you see, because pigs are sacred to the gods and are a key to understanding the ritual of the Eleusinian mysteries. The initiates were really put through and drugged to have some kind of an experience that would, well, reenact the myth of Persephone and Hades in the meaning. See, casting the pigs into the deep canyon trenches and fetching them back out again, as I described earlier in the Eleusinian mysteries, the last break, represented the descent of Persephone into the underworld and then her spring return to the surface of the earth. Now, the pigs in the trenches have also served with the practical purpose of supplying a host body for Persephone to hide in until the Atlerai women could help her by retrieving the pigs in their annual escape from the underground. Burning the pigs later that night would, according to an ancient religious idea, fire passes the soul from one location to another, frees the spirit of Persephone into the upper world from the underworld. I want you to compare this ritual with the children sacrificed to Baal, who pass through the fire from the physical world into the spiritual, as I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks, and I hope you've caught the shows. Now, the New Testament of the King James Version of the Bible states that pagan rituals like those performed in the Thesmorphia festival were the worship of demons, the things which the Gentiles sacrifice. Paul said, they sacrifice to devils. Recorded in Corinthians 1, verses 10 through 20. This makes you wonder if there's a connection between the ritual casting of the pigs into the deep canyon trenches, representing a descent into hell, and the biblical story where Jesus meeting the demon-possessed man at Gadarene. Do you remember that? In Luke chapter 8 it states, and they arrived in the country of Gadarene. And when he, Jesus, went forth to land, there met him out of the city a certain man, which had devils. When he, the demon-possessed man, saw Jesus, he cried out and fell before him, and with a loud voice said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, the Son of the God Most High? I beseech you, torment me not." And Jesus asked him, saying, "What's your name?" And he said, "Legion," because many devils were entered into him. And they besought him that he would not command them to go out into the deep. And there was there a herd of swine feeding on the mountain. Remember the story? And they besought him that he would suffer them to enter into those pigs. And he allowed it. Because that's what suffer them means, to allow. So Jesus allowed it. Then went the devils out of the man, the legions, and entered into the pigs. And the herd ran violently over a steep place into the sea, and were all killed. Recorded in Luke chapter 8, verses 26 through 33. The word deep in this text is abyssos, the abyss, and refers to the underworld bottomless pit, since the main elements of the sea, the swine, and the deep were used in the Bible story, and since the abyss, part of the underworld, was at the center, and since the cult rituals of the Thesmorphia were well known throughout Asia Minor and were considered by the Jews to be an activity of the devil, the inhabitants of Hades were known as Demeter's people, by the way, and Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft, was Persephone's underworld guide during the rituals. Clearly, the similarities, the historical proximities, are mind-boggling, especially since the demons requested an entry into the pigs. Yes, celebrating Easter with eggs comes directly from Satanism. Advent, another pagan festival. How can I link Resurrection Day and the symbols to the satanic celebration of Easter, symbolized by the egg? Well, once you study how the satanic Easter celebration is, and how closely eggs are tied to this pagan celebration, you will be able to fully understand it too, that the apostate churches are linking the spiritual light of Jesus Christ with the pagan darkness, impenetrable blackness of Satanism. In my opinion, this linking between Resurrection Day and pagan eggs is nothing more, nothing less than a link to Jesus Christ with Satan. Very few Christians would be so foolish as to accept an invitation to an Easter party from a group of pagan worshippers, would they? Yet, so many Christians will buy these eggs, use them as part of the Resurrection Day ceremonies, not even thinking that they have just accepted an invitation to celebrate as the pagans did in ancient times, celebrating Persephone's return. Spring. Listen to the description of the place which Easter and eggs have their pagan celebration. Ostara, also known as the spring or vernal equinox, festival of trees. Alban Ilir, it's also called. Ostara, the rites of spring, the rites of Ostra, occurs between March 19 and March 21st. The spring equinox, falling in there. Day and night are equal on that day, hence the name equinox. It's observed by pagans throughout the world. Wiccans, witches, Ostara is a festival of fertility, celebrating the birth of spring and the reawakening of life from the earth. The spring equinox was Christianized by the Roman Catholic Church, as were most pagan festivals of old. The new Christianity superimposed over the old pagan, hidden and still alive today beneath the Christianity. On the first Sunday after the first full moon following the equinox, or Ostra's Day, from where the name Easter was taken, the Christians celebrate their Easter. The Christian festival commemorates the resurrection of Christ, right? Synchronized by the Jewish Pesach, or Passover, and blended since the earliest days of Christianity with pagan European rites for a renewed season. It's preceded by a period of riotous vegetation rites and by a period of abstinence known as Lent. I'm back with more. Next on Talk Radio AM 640, I'm the Spaceman. This is A View from Space. Please send your emails, any communication you have, to spaceman at 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. 2 addresses, take the load. Thank you so much for the one you sent. I really appreciate it. I honestly and truly do. So let me just repeat what I said before the break. The Christian festival commemorates the resurrection of Christ, synchronized with the Jewish Pesach or Passover, and blended since the earliest days of Christianity with pagan European rites for the renewed season, the spring season. It's preceded by a period of riotous vegetation rites and by a period of abstinence known as Lent. Now stop here for a minute. I've just shown that we learned from the pagans that the very name Easter is taken from the pagan celebration of the rites of Ostra. The name of Easter was taken from the goddess Astarte, Isis, Ishtar, Semiramis. Let me repeat again this ritual of thesmorphia. The mysteries included a parody of the abduction and rape of Persephone and the positioning of the female cultists on the ground crying, in the role of Demeter for her daughter, and fasting for the return of Persephone, the return of spring. Sitting on the ground and fasting was also intended to mystically transfer the energies of the woman into the ground and also into the seeds. So it's no surprise the festival was held during the time of the fall planting season, or the fall, so as to guarantee a positive response to the cult's magic. Then, these witches have just told us that the celebration of Lent is pagan. Yet today there's a lot of Christian churches celebrating Lent. It's just another trick of linking Jesus Christ with Satan. Pagan holidays overlapping Christian holidays. Here's more on the Easter egg part of Easter. Witches will tell you that it is also believed that the humankind first got the idea of weaving baskets from watching birds weave nests. This is the origin of the association between colored Easter eggs and Easter baskets. Pisanki. They're the famous Ukrainian Easter eggs. Powerful amulets for fertility, prosperity, and protection. The making of Easter eggs was developed into a highly complex and symbolic art form in Ukraine, a country under Soviet domination for years and where there's a war being fought right now, the front line with Western Europe against Eastern Europe, and has traditions of devout Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity. Ukrainian Easter eggs are called pisanki. Singular, pisanka, means things that are written upon. There's a lot of symbol in the eggs themselves. The golden orb, for instance, of its yolk represents the sun. Its white shell is seen as the white goddess, and the whole egg is a symbol of rebirth. That information is the most direct you'll ever hear about the Easter egg. It's clearly stated that pagans view the egg as a symbol of sexual union between the male principle, sun god, and the female principle, the white goddess. The Satanist sees the egg as an amulet for fertility, prosperity, protection even, and sees the yolk of the egg as a symbol of the sun god. Its white shell is the white goddess. This view is the pagans' worship of the creature rather than the creator. Because that's what the Illuminati does. They worship the creation, not the creator. They view all the universe as a duality of nature, the female and the male principle of just plain sex. The same as their view of the egg. The pagan practice of eggs goes back centuries. Prepare to be shocked, and then be prepared to ask yourself how and why a Christian denomination could possibly go along with even any kind of a practice of this kind of Satanism. The origin of the Pesach. Eggs is just as clear. The ancient Druids had an egg as the sacred symbol of their order. And the Dionysia, or mysteries of Bacchus, was celebrated in Athens. One part of the night ceremony involved the consecration of an egg. The Hindu fables celebrate their mystic, symbolic egg as having a golden color. The people of Japan make their sacred egg to have been made of polished brass. In China, they dye them or paint their eggs. They're used for sacred festivals, just like in North America. In ancient times, eggs were used in the religious rites of the Egyptians and the Greeks and were hung up for mystic purposes in their temples. The classic poets all mention the mystic egg of the Babylonians. That was an egg of wondrous size, it said, and was also said to have fallen from heaven into the Euphrates River. The fishes rolled it to the bank, where the doves, having settled upon it, hatched smashed it. And out came Venus, who afterwards was called the Syrian goddess, that is Astarte. So the egg became one of the symbols of Astarte, or Ostara, or Ishtar, or Isis. If you can remember, this was included in the opening ceremonies of the 2006 Winter Olympics in Turin, Italy. The great worship of the goddess Astarte is done through the egg, and the connection is made to the Roman Catholic Church. Now, the Roman Catholic Church adopted this mystic egg of Astarte, Isis, Ishtar, Semiramis, and consecrated it as a symbol of Christ's resurrection. A form of prayer was even appointed to be used in connection with it. Pope Paul V, teaching his superstitious, devoted worshippers to pray at Easter in this way: say this, Blessed, O Lord, we beseech you, this thy creature of eggs, that it may become a wholesome sustenance unto thy servants, eating it in remembrance of our Lord Jesus Christ. Pope Paul V mentioned eating it because during ceremonies with the eggs, and the ancient pagans would eat the egg at the end of the ceremony, just as the initiates to be in the Thesmorphia would eat the egg to allow the spirit of Persephone into their bodies. It's satanic, demonic possession is what it is. You take it into yourself. So the Catholic Church adopted that pagan mystic ritual entirely, just by changing the names of the gods who were there praying to. This is the practice of the Roman Catholic Church for almost 1,500 years. Changing the names of the gods who they're praying to. They've adopted a lot of beliefs of the pagans into their religion to whom they were appealing, making it easier for the pagans to accept their Christianity. The Catholics also wrongly believe that they can take a pagan satanic belief, ritual, or object and Christianize it by simply saying some sort of elaborate prayer over it. No, it doesn't work that way. See, Easter is a time that is honored by nearly all of contemporary Christianity and is used to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ today. To perpetuate this myth of Ishtar, the holiday often involves a church service at sunrise, a feast which includes an Easter ham. Remember the pigs I talked about? That's why the ham is popular at Easter. Decorated eggs, stories about rabbits. Those who love to learn the truth, who want to ask questions. And believe me, a lot of questions have to be asked when it comes to the holiday of Easter. Is it truly the day when Jesus rose from the dead? Where did all the strange customs come from, which have nothing to do with Jesus Christ whatsoever? The purpose of this show on Talk Radio AM 640, AVFS, has been to help answer those questions and to help those who want to find out what it's really, truly all about and to draw their own conclusions. The first thing you've got to understand is that professing Christians were not the only ones who celebrated a festival called Easter. Oh, no. Ishtar, which is pronounced Easter, was a day that commemorated the resurrection of one of their gods they called Tammuz. Tammuz was, of course, the sun immaculately conceived by Semiramis, the wife of Nimrod, after he had died. Tammuz was believed to have been the only begotten son of the moon goddess and the sun god, Nimrod. In those ancient times, Nimrod lived, who was the grandson of one of Noah's sons, named Ham, of course. And Ham had a son, Cush, who married a woman named Semiramis. Cush and Semiramis then had a son and named him Nimrod. And after the death of his father, Nimrod married his own mother and became the powerful king. I'm back with more right after this break on Talk Radio AM 640. It's the Spaceman. This is AVFS. Emails to spaceman 640toronto.com or space at 640toronto.com. NS writes, and I believe this man to be someone who is really, truly, and honestly seeking the real story and what is the truth. He writes, I think my family and I celebrate this pagan ritual. Before the spring equinox, my mother makes us a bracelet from red and white thread. We're then supposed to take it off when we see a bird. Forget which one, he says. And then say, in Albanian, bird. Take this bracelet to the river and bring me back food and blessings. And he signs it with, I don't know if this is a satanic ritual or paganism. Signed NS. It's your call, NS. I just give you the facts so that you can hear both sides of the story. Now you make up your mind. So let me just go through the lineage one more time. There was a man named Nimrod, the grandson of Noah's son, Ham. Yes, Nimrod was black, a black man. Ham had a son named Cush, who married a woman named Semiramis. Cush and Semiramis then had a son, Nimrod. After the death of his father, Nimrod married his own mother and became the powerful king. The King James Version of the Bible tells of this man Nimrod in Genesis 10, chapter 10, verses 8 through 10, this way. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter, before the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. Nimrod became a god-man to the people, and Semiramis, his wife and mother, became the powerful queen of ancient Babylon. Nimrod was eventually killed by an enemy, and his body was cut in pieces and scattered in various parts of his kingdom. The same story goes with, of course, the Egyptian mystery religion with Isis and the young man Horus, and Osiris, of course, the husband. Horus, born immaculately, conceived without a man. As was Tammuz, so says Semiramis, mother and wife of Nimrod. Nimrod, as I said, killed by an enemy, body cut in pieces. Semiramis had all the parts gathered except for one, the part that couldn't be found. Of course, the same as the story of Osiris legend. The penis was missing. Later turned into a monument by his wife, Isis, which is an obelisk today. That missing part was his reproductive organ, which brings the next generation and keeps the family power. Semiramis claimed that Nimrod could not come back to life without it, and told the people of Babylon that Nimrod had ascended to the sun and was now to be called Baal, the sun god. Queen Semiramis also proclaimed that Baal would be present on earth in the form of a flame, whether a candle or a lamp when used in worship. Semiramis was creating a mystery religion, and with the help of Lucifer, she set herself up as goddess. Semiramis claimed that she and her son Tammuz were immaculately conceived. She taught that the moon was a goddess that went through a 28-day cycle and ovulated when full, just like a woman. She further claimed that she came down from the moon in a giant moon egg and then fell into the Euphrates River. This was to have happened at the time of the first full moon, after the spring equinox. That's when we decipher Easter to be. Ishtar soon became pregnant and claimed that it was the rays of the sun god Baal that caused her to conceive. But the son that she brought forth, named Tammuz, being noted for especially being fond of rabbits, Tammuz made them sacred in the ancient religion because Tammuz was believed to be the son of the sun god Baal. And Tammuz, of course, like his supposed father, followed in the footsteps with the power and become a great hunter. The day came when Tammuz was killed by a wild pig. Queen Ishtar, Isis, told the people that Tammuz was now ascended to his father Baal, and that the two of them, would be the worshippers in the sacred candle or lamp flame as Father, Son, and Spirit. The Trinity is born. Ishtar, who was now worshipped as the Mother of God and the Queen of Heaven, continued to build her mystery religion. The queen told the worshippers that when Tammuz was killed by the wild pig, some of the blood fell on the stump of an evergreen tree, and the stump grew into a full new tree overnight. This made the evergreen tree sacred by the blood of Tammuz. Pig's blood, I told you earlier in the show, was sacred to the gods. Now you know why. She also proclaimed a 40-day period of time of sorrow each year to prior to the anniversary of the death of her boy, Tammuz. This is known today as Lent. Yeah, the 40 days leading up to the Eastern Sunday. No meat is allowed to be eaten. During this time, no meat was to be eaten when Tammuz proclaimed the 40-day period of time of sorrow each year. Worshippers were to meditate upon the sacred mysteries of Baal and Tammuz and to make the sign of the T in front of their hearts as they worshipped. They also ate sacred cakes with the marking of a T. It looks like a cross on the top of their hot cross bun. Every year, the first Sunday after the first full moon, after the spring equinox, that celebration was held, which is the day decided upon when we celebrate Easter. It was Ishtar's Sunday and was celebrated with rabbits and eggs. Ishtar also proclaimed that because Tammuz was killed by a pig, that a pig must be eaten on that Sunday. By now you must have made the connection that paganism has infiltrated the contemporary Christian churches big time, and indicates that this paganism came in by way of the Roman Catholic Church system. The truth is that Easter has nothing whatsoever to do with the resurrection of one called Jesus Christ. The truth is that the 40 days of Lent, eggs, rabbits, hot cross buns, Easter hams have everything to do with the ancient pagan religion of Mystery Babylon and the ancient mystery religion of ancient Egypt. These are all Antichrist activities. Satan is a master deceiver and has filled the lives of well-meaning, professing Christians with idolatry. And they don't even know it. They are pagan customs of the worship of Baal. You've got to answer for your activities and for what you teach children, don't you? These customs of Easter, honoring Baal, who is also Satan and is still worshipped as the rising sun, and his house is the house of the rising sun. Gives you a little insight into the 60s music and a band called The Animals, who made a song called The House of the Rising Sun, a #1 hit for months. How many churches have sunrise services on Ishtar's day and face the sun rising in the east, do you think? How many will use or have already this weekend used colored eggs and will tomorrow and tell the rabbit stories as they did in ancient Babylon? It's true. Now, this is not an attack on Catholics, but I rather hope it would help Catholics comprehend better what the Catholic institution sees as its primary function. Information on tonight's show on Talk Radio AM 640 and A View from Space will also help Protestants understand that they haven't fallen very far from the tree that gave them birth. See 1 Corinthians 14 through 26. Look for how our assembling together as believers has changed. The information clarifies what's called the Nicolaitans, lording over, conquering the laity. The laity is just a common word for the people. I'm the Spaceman. This is Talk Radio AM 640. More coming up. They call me the Spaceman. This is View from Space. It's Talk Radio AM 640. Final segment in tonight's show. Shocking as it might seem to the general public, the most enduring and profound controversy in the subject of Christianity is whether or not a person named Jesus Christ ever really existed. Jesus is a mythical figure in the tradition of pagan mythology, and almost nothing in all of ancient literature would lead you to believe otherwise. Anyone wanting to believe Jesus lived and walked as a real, live human being must do so despite the evidence, not because of it. There is not a conception associated with Christ that is not common to some or all of the Savior cults of antiquity. The gospel story is an artificial, non-historical work that has been fabricated from source materials that can be identified and traced to their incorporation into the Gospels. There is not a particle of hard evidence that Jesus of Nazareth ever existed. What do these people know that the church isn't telling you? Prayers offered up in Christian worship in the earliest days of the faith were addressed to our Lord the Son, evidencing that primitive Christians were quite in the spirit of pagan forms and ideologies. The Christian religion and Masonry have one and the same common origin also. Both are taken from the worship of the sun. The difference between their origin is that the Christian religion is a parody on the worship of the sun, in which they put a man whom they call Christ in the place of the sun and pay him the same adoration which was originally paid to the sun. You see, the sun has attracted the attention of mankind for adoration all over the world from the very beginning of time in human history. It's attained the position of preeminence among the deities of nature in ancient times, the prominence and glory of the solar orb, its beauty, its splendor, its warmth, its power, its importance, and the creation and maintenance of life, its regularity in diffusing light and enlightening the world, its primal role of the cosmic evolution and consequent mystery surrounding it, had secured for the sun a history of interest and importance, equaled by none, to which every age and every race has contributed its pages. Could it be that Jesus Christ is another mythical god in the long line of other mythical gods like Hercules and Zeus? Contrary to popular belief, there was no single man at the genesis of Christianity, but many characters rolled into one, the majority of whom were personifications of the ongoing solar myth, the repeating solar myth. These exploits were well known as reflected by such popular deities as Mithra, Hercules, Dionysus, and a lot of others throughout the Roman Empire and beyond. The story of Jesus, as portrayed in the Gospels, is revealed to nearly identically detail to that of the early savior gods Krishna and Horus, for a millennia preceding Christianity, held great favor with the people in much of the same way that Jesus does today. So, the Jesus character is not unique or original, not divine revelation. These Redeemer tales are similar because they reflect the actual exploits of a variety of men who did and said the identical things, but because they are representatives of the same extremely ancient body of knowledge that revolved around the celestial bodies and natural forces, the result of this myth-making has been the Christ conspiracy, the greatest story ever sold. In this highly controversial and explosive information, an enormous amount of startling evidence to demonstrate that Christianity and the story of Jesus were created by members of various secret societies, mystery schools, and religions in order to unify the Roman Empire under one state religion. That's what the goal was. In making such a fabrication, this multinational cabal drew upon a multitude of myths and rituals that already existed long before the Christian era and reworked them for centuries into the story and religion passed down to today, as they constantly grind away at a changeover of the infiltration, reworking through the centuries the story of religion. From the very beginning, the research to unravel the Christ story, you encounter suspicious territory. You look back in time and discover that the real foundation of Christianity appears nothing like the image provided by the church. So, far more rosy and cheerful than the reality is the picture painted by the vested interests as the origins of the Christian religion. A miracle-making founder and pious inspired apostles who faithfully, infallibly, recorded his words and deeds shortly after his advent, and then went about spreading the faith with great gusto and success in saying, "We're saving souls." Contrary to this popular delusion, the reality is that, as well as the enormous amount of bloodshed which accompanies this foundation, Christianity's history is rife with forgery and fraud. So rampant is the treachery, chicanery, that any serious researcher must immediately begin to wonder about the story itself. So, in truth, the Christian tale has always been as difficult to swallow as the myths and fables of the other cultures. Yet countless people have been able to overlook the rational mind and to, well, blindly believe it, even though they may equally as easily dismiss the nearly identical stories in these other cultures that came before. Research shows there's no evidence in recorded history of the Christian founder that the earliest Christian proponents, either utterly credulous or astoundingly deceitful, and that these defenders of the faith were compelled, under incessant charges of fraud, to admit that Christianity was a rehash of older religions. It's also been demonstrated that the world into which Christianity was born was filled with assorted gods and goddesses opposed to a monotheistic vacuum. In fact, in their fabulous exploits and wondrous powers, many of these gods and goddesses were virtually the same as Christ, the Christ character, as attested by the Christian apologists themselves. You'll discover that Jesus Christ is in fact a compilation of these different various gods that came before, who were worshipped, and those whose dramas were regularly played out by the ancient people long before the Christian era came along. When you compare the stories of Jesus and Horus, the son of Osiris, and the ancient Egyptian mystery religion, you find this: Egypt, the primeval seat of learning, was the high seat of sun adoration, sun worship. The Sphinx, with the face to the east, represents Harmakas, young Horus, or the rising sun. The orb is Osiris, and the ruling god of the day. In its descent, it is the dying deity going below to the land of shades, only to be resurrected as the victorious Horus, piercing the head of the dragon of darkness, states the book of Irish Druids and old Irish religions. The Egyptian sun Horus predated the Christ character by thousands of years. This has been A View from Space on Talk Radio AM 640. Coast to Coast is next. I'm Space, and I'm out.